Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the exalted one, the worthy one, the supremely enlightened one. Dveme bhikkhave anta pabbajitena nasevitabban yochayang kame sukama sukhallikano yogo hino gammo potujjaniko anariyo anatta sanghito yochayang atta kilamatano yogo dukkho anariyo anatta sanghitoti. The most venerable Mahasangha, friends in the Dhamma, at this moment we are going to discuss one of the main discourses in Buddhism, Dhammacakka Sutta, which comes in Samyutta Nikaya. The Four Noble Truths, the great discovery of the Buddha. When the Buddha started his sermons at the very beginning, Buddha explains the main topic in Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, the heart of Buddhism, Buddha's great discovery. When Buddha attained enlightenment, he spent several weeks near the Bodhi tree, near the Bodh Gaya, and also after a few weeks, he decided to explain his message to the world with the invitation of Mahabrahma, and also he looked at the world and finally he decided to explain his great message. At the beginning of his sermon, he invites the world, Eto vinyo puriso asato amayavi navankajato. I invite the people, those who are honest and wise, to listen to this message. With this invitation, Buddha started to explain his message. First of all, Buddha concerned that through whom I explain this message first. Then he remembered Alara Kalama and Uddakarama Putta. He understood that they have passed away. Then Buddha concerned the 5 ascetics who practiced the Dhamma with him for several years. Then Buddha went to Varanasi from Bodh Gaya. And after a discussion with them, Buddha explains his message. First, Buddha says, Dveme bhikkhave anta pabajitena nasevitabba. Because those 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What 2? Yochayang kamesu kama sukhalikhan yogo. The pursuit of sensual happiness in the sensual pleasures. Hino gammo potujjaniko anariyo anatta sanghito, which is low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial. And also, yochayang attakilamatthanu yogo, the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful ignoble, unbeneficial. Etete bhikkhave ubhavante anupagamma. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle path, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. When Buddha explains his message, first of all, he explained not to follow some extremes, Kamasukhalikkhana Yoga and Atthakila Yoga. The pursuit of sensual happiness in sensual pleasures, and also Atthakila Yoga, the pursuit of self-mortification. When we discuss these two streams, some educators have explained these topics in deep level, in various ways. However, we would like to explain these two things in simple. The reason is that as the experience, Buddha knew very well, these two extremes were followed by some people at that time, especially the 5 ascetic people. They followed Atthakila Yoga. That is a very painful, ignoble, and unofficial path. First of all, directly, the Buddha rejected this path. And also, Buddha says, without going these extremes, we should follow the noble, the middle path. The middle path is one of the main teachings in Buddhism. When we refer some discourses such as Dhammacakka Sutta, Buddha has explained the middle path in various ways. Middle path depends on understanding the dependent origination or Patisampada. According to Kacchanagotta Sutta, the worthy one says, if a person sees the arising of 5 aggregates, he doesn't go to the extreme of annihilationism, Uchedavada. And also, if a person sees the cessation of 5 aggregates, he doesn't go to the extreme of eternalism or Sasadavada. These both extremes should be overcome with one vision, which is the Patisampada, Arya Jnana, or Arya Nyaya, or Idapachata, the causality, the dependent origination. That is very important. In short, Buddha has explained the middle path. Finally, when we see the discourse, Buddha says it in another words, yang kinchi samudaya dhammang sabbantan nirodha dhammang. That is the short message in Buddhism about the dependent origination or causality or the middle path. When we discuss the Four Noble Truths, actually, all the doctrines that Buddha has explained for the liberation can be summarized in this one topic, which is the Four Noble Truths. The reason is that this topic relates to 5 aggregates, the dependent origination, and the Noble Eightfold Path. The more someone understands the Four Noble Truths, the more he understands the 5 aggregates and the dependent origination. Sometimes Buddha has explained the first noble truth, the noble truth of suffering, as the 5 aggregates. 5 aggregates is the first truth in another way. And also sometimes Buddha says the 6 senses, Understanding the six senses is the way how to understand the first truth, Dukkha Satya. And also when we discuss the path that leads to getting rid of suffering, Magga Satya, it is also explained in various ways. Sometimes Buddha says the path as the Noble Eightfold Path. Sometimes Buddha says you have to practice only one thing, which is mindfulness. Sometimes Buddha says you have to understand or practice only three things, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sometimes Buddha says, according to Abhinya Sutta, you have to practice only concentration and insight meditation. Sometimes Buddha says you have to practice 5 spiritual faculties. Sometimes Buddha says you have to practice 7 enlightenment factors. In various ways, Buddha has explained the path. On the other side, it is very interesting that Buddha says in Gavampati Sutta, if a person can understand one truth, he is able to understand other truths too. Understanding one truth helps us to understand other truths. According to Nibbedika Sutta, the worthy one says, I explain only 2 things to the world. In the past or the present, I explain only 2 things to the world. What they are? The suffering of dukkha and the cessation of dukkha. Dukkha also can be divided into 2, dukkha and samudaya, and also nirodha and nirodhamagga. In various ways, Buddha has explained this same message in various words and various theories. And also, this topic is not easy. You know, when someone asks us, what are the Four Noble Truths? We can say very easily, dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, magga. But when we refer the teachings of Buddhism, actually it is not easy. We have to follow several references, especially in Vinaya Pitaka. First of all, we explain this message, we can see in Vinaya Pitaka Mahavagga Pali. Then we can see a lot of discourses in Samyutta Nikaya in Sutta Pitaka. And also we can see some doctrines about the Four Noble Truths in Patisambhida Magga, Satchakata. And also we can see some information about the Four Noble Truths in Satcha Vibhanga, in Vibhanga Pakarana. And also we can see a lot of information about the Four Noble Truths in Yamaka Pakarana, Satcha Yamaka. If we can keep everything in a line, we can have a very clear understanding about the Four Noble Truths. When we discuss the Buddha's message, there are several main topics we can see in Buddhism. They are Patisampada, the dependent origination, the Four Noble Truths, Ayatana or 6 senses, Aryattangika Magga, the Noble Eightfold Path, 5 aggregates, Skanda Panchaka, and Ayatana. There are several main topics we can see in Tripitaka. When we study these main topics, main teachings in Buddhism, we have to refer several books as parallel. That is very important. If we study only one sutta or one teaching, our knowledge is complete. If you want to study Satta Bojjhanga, the 7 enlightenment factors, you have to learn Bojjhanga Samyutta. And also Bojjhanga Kata and Patisampada, Bojjhanga Vibhanga, like that. We have to take everything in a line. Then we can receive a very clear understanding about these topics. Especially as monks, we have a great duty to understand these main topics. We usually go to study some discourses. That is important. But I think my point of view is that we should try to understand the main concept or teachings in Buddhism, such as the dependent origination, Four Noble Truth, five aggregates, three characteristics, the Noble Eightfold Path, the seven enlightenment factors. If we can understand a topic clearly, then automatically we can understand everything. That is very important. Among them, understanding the Four Noble Truths is very, very, very important. The reason is that all the doctrines explained for liberation can be summarized in this, the Four Noble Truths. Therefore, it is very important to understand. When we see the Buddha's message in various places, Buddha has explained the importance of learning Four Noble Truths. In this discourse, Buddha has explained Pubbya Ananusutisu Dhammesu Chakkung Udapadi, Jnanang Udapadi, Panya Udapadi, Vidya Udapadi, Aloka Udapadi, like that. Here it is very important to understand. Buddha says, I realized something which I hadn't heard before. That is the very, very important. That is the nature of the Dhamma, Patisotagami, against water. You know very well, before Buddha did his renunciation, great renunciation, Buddha had heard about Jara, Marana, like that. He had understood decay, sickness, and death. But after he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, when he went to explain the Four Noble Truths, at the beginning of the discourse, Buddha says, I realized, I discovered, I understood something that I had never heard. This is his own discovery. This is not a creation. Buddha says very clearly, a Buddha appears or not in this world, this truth is forever. We respect the Buddha because in this eon, he's the person who realized, discovered, and proclaimed to the world the first time. That is why we respect the Buddha. Buddha is Magganyu, Maggavidu, Maggakovidu. He is expert in the path. He knows the path. He is the first person who realized this message by himself in this eon. Later, his disciples realized this message. And in short, the Four Noble Truths are Dukkha Satya, Samudaya Satya, Nirodha Satya, and Magga Satya. Dukkha Satya means the noble truth of suffering. Samudaya Satya, the noble truth of the origin of suffering. Nirodha Satya, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. Magga Satya, the noble truth of the path that leads to getting rid of suffering. These are the things that Buddha explains in this discourse in short. Buddha says, we have to listen to this message as the result of appearing a Buddha in this world. Without a Buddha appears in this world, we can never have to listen to this message. This is the unique in Buddhism. When Buddha explains the first truth, the Dukkha Satya, easily we can understand Jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, vyadipi dukkho, maranampi dukkha, like that. Those things can be understood by anyone. Even someone doesn't listening to Dhamma, they also can understand this dukkha. That is the dukkha dukkha. There is another dukkha, that viparinama dukkha, the changing. And also there is another dukkha, sankhata dukkha. That is the special thing. Here Buddha explains the noble truth of suffering as the sankhata dukkha. That is the thing Buddha explains here. This dukkha is not painful. Usually we translate the term of Pali dukkha as suffering. Some people, especially in the Western people, they think that this is a philosophy that always says suffering, suffering, suffering. But as monks, especially we should understand the clear meaning of suffering that Buddha has explained. We can have a chance to listen to very special explanation about the suffering or dukkha in Satya Yamaka, in Yamaka Pakarana. Buddha says there, as I mentioned before, Kaikan dukkang, chetasika dukkang, tapetva avasesang, dukkha satyang, na dukkang. Again, Buddha says, Kaikan dukkang, chetasika dukkang, dukkhancha, dukkha satyancha. We usually know the second part. Kaika dukkhancha, chetasika dukkhancha, those things, dukkhancha, dukkha satyancha. Even according to Dhammacakka Sutta, we understand that message. Sometimes you may ask why it has another special meaning, why Buddha didn't explain this information in the first discourse. It is a usual question. But you should understand, when Buddha explained first his message, most of people were very gifted persons. When Buddha explained something in short, they could realize everything because they have developed their mind. Therefore, they could understand easily. Even Bahya Daruchirya, when Buddha explained his message in short, he could understand very clearly. They are the gifted person. If we are also gifted, we can also understand very easily, no doubt. But we should understand, if we are not gifted, honestly, we should have to refer many discourses and teachings in Buddhism. I think if we are not gifted, we have to study Abhidhamma Pitaka. That is very, very important. If someone is very gifted, he doesn't need to learn Abhidhamma Pitaka. Abhidhamma Pitaka is not for wise people. Abhidhamma Pitaka is for normal people like we, because it has a lot of information. You know, if you meet a very little girl or boy, if he or he asks something, you explain everything because he is very little. But if some matured person asks you something, you explain in short because of his understanding. Like that, Abhidhamma Pitaka is needed for normal people, ordinary people, not for gifted persons. Sutta Pitaka is for gifted persons. Therefore, we have to study, at least, I think, if we want to understand the form, the first part of the five aggregates, Rupa Khanda. Although we study Sutta Pitaka, we don't have very big explanation in Sutta Pitaka about Rupa Khanda. Rupa Khanda is very, very primary level understanding among the five aggregates. Buddha says if a person can understand Rupa Kanda clearly, he can attain Anagami. But we usually say that Rupa is Pataviapo Tejo Vayu. It is very easy to say. But when we go to some references, it is not an easy topic. It has a lot of information. That is why we need to follow and study some teachings in Buddhism, no matter it is the real Buddha's message or later explanations. However, when we pay our attention about the Four Noble Truths, especially the first one, Dukkha Satya, Buddha says, Kaikan dukkang, Ketasika dukkang, Tapetva, Avasesan dukkang, na dukkang. Besides physical pain and mental pain, the rest is the noble truth of suffering, not suffering. When we explain this Dukkha Satya, we can see some information in Charya Nanata Jnana in Patisambhida Magga. As I mentioned before, there are three behaviors, Vijnanacharya, Jnanacharya, and Ajnanacharya. The Vijnanacharya explains this first experience. When we contact something through our senses, if we have primary understanding about something, that first experience is neither wholesome nor unwholesome. That is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. That is just a result of previous mental states. That first experience is explained as niraga, niddosa, nimmoha, nimmana, and finally it says pakati parisuddhamidam chittang. Their consciousness is very pure. When we contact something, very first experience, that says in Anguttara Nikaya, Pavassaramidam bhikkhave chittang. The first experience, consciousness is very pure. That is neither wholesome nor unwholesome. That is very pure. But after that experience, we take it again with our mind consciousness. Then we create it with our ignorance, then suffering arises. Then we are in the samsaric circle. The very first experience is the noble truth of suffering, that dukkha satya should be realized. Buddha never says astu dukkha satya pahatabang. Dukkha satya not be overcome. It should be realized. The reason is that even Arahantas, they also have the dukkha satya, but they don't have dukkha. Arahantas have dukkha satya, the noble truth of suffering, that they have no suffering. Suffering arises later after first experience is. Suffering is that Kaikan dukkang, Chetasika dukkang, dukkhancha, dukkha satyancha. Later we make something as my, as me, as myself. That is suffering. And also that is the noble truth of suffering. Why is that? It depends on the first five aggregates. First five aggregates are pure. Then the second five aggregates, which consist with ignorance, is that clinging to five aggregates. The five aggregates of clinging. That is the cause of suffering. That should be overcome. That should be reduced. Then we can see the second truth, samudaya satya, the noble truth of the origin of suffering. In short, craving. Craving is the nearest reason of suffering, but it is not only reason. The reason is that when we see the craving or tanha in Patisampada, craving also has some reasons. Vedana paccaya tanha. Craving arises because of feeling. Feeling also has some causes. Passa paccaya vedana. Like that, when we go to the first, we meet the very first cause that ignorance or delusion, avidya paccaya sankhara. Avidya is the very first cause of suffering. There, we should have to understand the Patisampada or the dependent origination. And also, when we see the samudaya satya, the cause of suffering, when we refer the satya yamaka, there it says, samudaya satyang, samudayancha satyancha. Samudaya satya, samudaya satyang, samudayancha, samudaya satyancha. Samudaya or the cause of suffering is a cause and also the noble truth of the cause of suffering. It has a deep meaning. When we see this, there are many causes in this world. There are some causes which helps us to go to heaven, go to Brahma realm, or go to lower realms like hells. Those are the causes. But this cause is explained for our sansaric journey. Usually people before the Buddha, they thought that the cause of suffering is outside. That is why some people left everything. They gave up their properties, their relatives, their wealth, and finally they gave up even their clothes. They thought that suffering arises from outside. That is why they rejected everything, such as Nigantas. But the interesting thing in Buddhism that having all these things, we can attain enlightenment. Such as, King Suddhodana. He attained enlightenment as a king. If the reason of suffering arises in outside, we can overcome the reason or cause very easily. How do we do it? Within one day, we can attain enlightenment. It is very easy. How do we do it? We can give up everything, material things. And also we can donate our physical body too. Jumping into a place where some animals like in the zoo, we can donate our physical body too. It is very easy to dedicate all material things within one day. But reducing trishna or craving is not like that. Craving arises inside. That is why Buddha says, Nete kama yani chitrani loke sankapparago purisasa kamo. Lust arises inside, not outside. Therefore, we have to overcome clinging to five aggregates. We have clinging or craving to five aggregates within us. If we can overcome the clinging to five aggregates, automatically we are released from outside material world. Therefore, the cause of suffering within us inside with our mind. The reason or cause, samudaya. Samudaya can be outside in the ordinary level. But samudaya satya explained in Buddhism can be seen inside within us. If we want to overcome suffering, we have to overcome the craving which is inside. Then next, through the Nirodha Satya, the cessation of suffering. that relates to the second one too. The cause is craving, and cessation from craving is the Nirodha Satya, the noble truth of cessation of suffering. If we release from craving, that is the Nirodha. If we can overcome this clinging or craving inside completely, that is the Nirodha Satya. For that, we find the path, Magga Satya, Arya Attangika Magga, Dukkha Nirodha Gamini Patipada Arya Satya, the noble truth of the path that leads to getting rid of suffering. First of all, we understand the noble truth of suffering, Dukkha Satya, then Samudaya Satya or cause or origin. Next, the cessation of origin, Nirodha, and the Magga, the path. The path is very important. You know, some people can explain the results very easily. I have no any attachment. I am free. A person can say it very easily. But we should show the path how we attain that result. Buddhism always explains not only vision, but the path, the mission too. Mission also very important. The path, what we have to practice to achieve the real result. The Buddha explains, first of all, we should have the Suttamaya Jnana, the knowledge of hearing about these four things, the Four Noble Truths. If we have confidence in these four things, Dukkhopanisa Saddha, understanding the noble truth of suffering, or the Four Noble Truth of suffering, it leads to develop our confidence for Saddha. Then we are inspired by listening this message. Then we trust in what the Buddha taught. Whenever we are ignorant, then other things gradually increase. When we are not ignorant, we are free from suffering. Whenever we see something with ignorance, that there is something outside, then it ends with jara, marana, decay, and death. We are consist with suffering. If we can understand, as soon as we experience something, the first experience has already ceased, then we release from outside. We see the inside, that is inside meditation. That scene also not permanent. It also, that understanding also arises and ceases every moment. They are with tatta tatta vijakkati. In the present moment, we reflect on it again and again, arising and ceasing. With this understanding, we are hurried to go forward. We need a freedom, liberation, emancipation. Whenever we are ignorant, we are like in a prison. The main purpose of everyone is that freedom, emancipation. We do everything for freedom, liberation. Buddha has explained the path for liberation. This is the real path for liberation. We should liberate from outside and inside too. For that, we should understand the first truth, Dukkha Satya, five aggregates, and also we understand the origin of suffering, clinging to five aggregates, cessation, letting go from five aggregates, and the path, the Noble Eightfold Path. Then we find the very peaceful path with Sammaditthi. There are Sammaditthi, your right understanding is first. First of all, we should understand these Four Noble Truths as such a jnana. This is as a truth. And then Krutya jnana, we should have a knowledge to practice it. The time that we practice it. Kicha jnana. And also Kata jnana. After we completed some stages, we have knowledge that I have completed these stages. Satya jnana, Kicha jnana, Kata jnana. These four things we practice in four ways. Dukkha satyam parinyayam, samudaya satyam pahatabbang, nirodha satyam satchikatabbang, magga satyam bhavetabbang. Dukkha satyam parinyayam, five aggregates should be understood. And samudaya satyam pahatabbang, cravings should be overcome or reduced. Nirodha satyam satchikatabbang, the cessation or the nibbana should be achieved or realized. And magga satyam bhavetabbang, the path that leads to getting rid of suffering should be developed or practiced. With this understanding, with hearing, little by little, gradually, we enter the path. We see the path explained by the Buddha. Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vacha, like that. These steps we practice. We do everything with these 8 steps. When we enter this path, in a day, several times, many times, these things come to our mind. When you have discipline in your speech, we think that now I practice Samma Vacha, right speech. When we have good behavior, we understand now I have right action, Samma Kammanta. When we have good effort, we understand now I have Samma Vayama, right effort. When we practice mindfulness, we think that now I am practicing Samma Sati. When we have right intention, Nekkhamma Sankappa, Avyapada Sankappa, Avihimsa Sankappa, we understand now I have Samma Sankappa. Our mind is filled with happiness, practicing these teachings explained by the exalted one. We think that this is our real safety. These are real friends. We have created, we have made some friends within us. Then we don't find friends from outside. We have little light within us. That is the thing Buddha says, Dhamma Deepa Bhikkhave Viharata Dhamma Sarana Nanya Sarana. Dwell with yourself, dwell with the Dhamma as an island, as a refuge, with other no refuge. This is the real safety, secure, that we have created within us. Day by day, we go forward on this path, reducing suffering and developing inner peace, happiness. This is the real path for happiness. We do everything giving the priority to these 8 steps. Even though we do some activities, duties, responsibilities in our day-to-day life, we understand very clearly those things are not useful for our liberation. Our liberation, our freedom, our refuge depends on this practice. Then always we try to develop our samadhi by associating spiritual friends, listening to Dhamma, Yoniso Manasikara, wise consideration, and practicing the path again and again. Day by day, we go forward on this path. The more we go forward, the more we reflect on these four things. As we discussed yesterday, when we practice fourfold mindfulnesses, among them, when we practice Dhammanupassana, when our mind gains concentration, we reflect on the Four Noble Truths again and again. When mind is pure, it is very easy to contemplate on these four things that we heard before. First, we start this path with confidence, but when we go forward, we see the results, visible results. Those are the qualities of the Dhamma. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo. Dhamma is well expounded by the Blessed One. Sanditiko, visible results. Akaliko, immediately effective. Opanaiko, Ehipasiko, calling one to come and see. Opanaiko, leading onwards. And Pachatang Veditabbo is to be realized by the wise. When we go forward by practicing Dhamma, we can see the results of the Dhamma. Especially, we see the quality of Swakata. Swakata means well explained. The beginning is excellent, the middle is excellent, and the end is excellence. The beginning is Sila. When we practice Sila or virtue, we have no mistakes, we have no guilty. We are proud of our behavior. We are happy about our behavior. We have confidence in our behavior, in our speech and actions. That is a safety. That is a protection. We usually say that I protect Dhamma. Actually, we don't need to protect Dhamma. When we practice Dhamma, we are protected by the Dhamma. That is the nature of the Dhamma. The way how we protect Dhamma is that practicing Dhamma. When we practice Dhamma, actually Dhamma also alive in this world. When someone look at us, they also very happy, they pleased to see us. Then they ask, I can see something from you, let me know please, what you practice. As Venerable Sariputta asks from Venerable Assaji. When Bhante Sariputta saw Arahat Assaji, Venerable Sariputta was so happy, seeing his very pleasant behavior. I think you have practiced something since your senses are very pleasant. Let me know, please, what you practice. Then Venerable Assaji explained the message in short until Venerable Sariputta passed away. Every day when he went to sleep, he checked where Venerable Assaji was. Then he worshipped to that direction, and also he kept his head to that direction with great gratitude. In this message, in this situation, we can understand Buddha says, if we are real friends, if we have close relatives and friends, the highest gift that we can give to them is that explaining this message, especially for noble truths. If you have a very slight understanding about the Four Noble Truths, if you have a close friend or relative, your duty is to explain this message for them too. That is the great gift. That is why it is said, the gift of Dhamma excels all other gifts. And also, when we understand the Four Noble Truths, we understand the dependent origination, causality. Iti imasmin satidam hoti. When this is, this happens. When this is not, this doesn't happen. When we understand the Four Noble Truths, we understand the five aggregates. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Rupa forms, Vedana feeling, Sanya perception, Sankhara mental formations, and Vijnana consciousness. These five things belong to the first truth, the noble truth of suffering. When we understand the first noble truth, it means we understand Skandha, Dhatu, Ayatana. Panchaskandha, Ayatana, six senses, Arammana, six external objects, and Namarupa, mentality and corporeality. We understand everything as the result of understanding the first noble truth. And also, when we understand the cause of suffering, the origin of suffering, the second noble truth, Samvesatya, we understand craving, we understand feeling, contact, like, from avidya to decay or death, we understand all the steps of the dependent origination. Avidya pacha sankhara, sankhara pacha vijnana, like that. Ignorance considers mental formations. And also, when we understand the cessation of suffering, Nirodha Satya, we understand the Patisampada in another way. Avidyayatveva asesa viraga nirodha sankhara nirodho. With the cessation of ignorance, mental formations cease. Sankhara nirodha vijnana nirodho. With the cessation of mental formations, consciousness ceases. Like that, we understand the Patisampada in the cessation level. And also, when we understand the Magga Satya, or the Noble Eightfold Path, we understand all the factors, all the teachings that need to practice for liberation. The 37 enlightenment factors, fourfold mindfulnesses, fourfold efforts, four Iddhipada, five spiritual faculties, five powers, 7 enlightenment factors, the Noble Eightfold Path, everything is understood as the result of understanding the Magga Satya, the path that leads to getting rid of suffering. That is why at the beginning we said that understanding the Four Noble Truths leads to understand everything explained by the Buddha for liberation. This is the heart of Buddhism. Four Noble Truth is the heart of Buddhism. As the result of understanding this valuable message, we are able to understand three characteristics, three lakshana: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Impermanence, dissatisfactoriness, and selflessness. This is the result. When we see this reality as arising and ceasing, we realize that everything is impermanent, everything is dissatisfactory, every phenomena are selfless. Then we become upekha, equanimity. We have no any struggle with anyone. We are silent. We are in equanimity. We see the world, what it's happened. Okay? We hope to discuss the Dhammacakka Sutta in short because we have only 1 hour. Therefore, we discuss Dhammacakka Sutta, which comes in Samyutta Nikaya and Mahavagga Pali in Vinaya Pitaka. End of this sermon, Venerable Kondanya realized very special thing that Yankinchi Samudaya Dhammam Sabbantan Nirodha Dhammam. If something arises with conditions, when conditions cease, the result also ceases. He saw the Dhamma. Buddha was so happy as his great effort for a long time, for millions of eons that he had dedicated. This is the first time that he saw his result. He could have to attain enlightenment for a long time. Having that chance, he dedicated everything for us. This is the time that he was see the result, his great effort and dedication. Then he was so happy. Anyasi watabo kondanyo. Anyasi watabo kondanyo. Kondanya knew the message. Kondanya clearly understood the message. This is the way how he explained his inner happiness, his satisfaction. Then after a few days, little by little, Venerable Vapabhadya attained the very first level of enlightenment, stream entry, and also finally, Mahana Masaji, they attained Sotapanna. Now there are 5 persons who have attained stream entry Sotapanna. Finally, next Buddha explained Anattalakkana Sutta. Listening to that Sutta, 5 of them attain enlightenment, gain Asavakya Jnana. Okay, dear friends in the Dhamma, this is the thing that I hope to explain to you about the Dhammacakka Sutta. If you have any question, next time you can ask. And also we can discuss. We have very senior monks who are respected. And we can do a discussion too. Okay, thank you so much for your kind dedication and attention to this speech. By the power of this spiritual energy, may all of our spiritual goals meet with success. Finally, may all of us attain the final bliss of liberation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Dukkam pantaca niddukkam, bhayam pantaca nidbhayam, sokam pantaca nissokam, hontu sabbe pipanino. Dukin pelena sat, dukin midetwa, bien pelena sat, bien eti vetwa, sovinte vena sat, somnas vetwa, nitin me hema sat, Suepan vetwa.